Should you buy the Starfield headphone? Is this a hidden gem, a novelty, or just plain trash? Today we're gonna find out. So there are a lot of channel sponsorships going on for Bethesda and Starfield right now. A lot of channels are being sponsored by them and they're producing some great content. This channel, this video is not one of those. I purchased this with my own money because just like you, I'm super excited about this game. Like I cannot explain to you how excited I am. I'm very pumped. Bethesda, please don't mess this up. Please. I'm so sad. I need this. Now, I've actually never reviewed the standard Xbox headset, so it felt like a good time to actually knock both out in the same review, because essentially this is the Xbox headset with just a skin pack. And based off the previous designs that they've made for other editions, they seem to care about this one a lot. Considering that this is the 20th anniversary edition for their headset, I consider the skin pack to be pretty mid. This one seems a lot more in-depth. So I want to point out a couple of small details about the build that make this thing, I think, pretty special. One of them is a lot of the small text on this device isn't just nonsense. You do have a couple things like Nova Galactic Pilot Comset, for example, like M5 5000, like stuff like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there is actually some functional utility here, or some at least informational utility here. Like it has like a little adjust text that shows you that the headband adjusts. It has your comm versus your cockpit on your balance on your left side, which we'll talk about more in a second. On the inside of the ear cups, it actually points out some information about the headphone. Like for example, it talks about the 40mm driver size, the impedance of the headphone, which isn't a big deal because it's a wireless headset. Now this also has something that I've never actually visually seen on another headphone, which is a listed clamp force pressure of 0.8 pounds, which by my head, it's actually a little bit tight. So its function is sort of influencing the design, which I kind of dig a lot. Like I like the idea of this sort of utilitarian style of visual design, at least. The microphone is transparent and very cool looking. It's kind of bringing in some nothing vibes, and it's got a little light indicator on it. Now I will say that the position of this microphone and its like positionability is very excellent. Like this thing does exactly what you want it to. It doesn't have a weird like reset period where if you move it up, it like kind of only goes halfway up and it doesn't quite go to where you push it. Anywhere you push this thing, it just stops. This is very well designed. I want to give them full credit for that. And then there's just kind of the choice of colors and just the general fit and finish of this device. Now it is plasticky, it's not particularly well built. You can kind of hear it rattling, like everything. But what is nice is like the paint quality looks excellent. They also like went a little bit further in depth than they seemingly have with other versions, where like they've got this red leather and it finishes in this red plastic. And visually, I think this thing it totally nails the aesthetic. It's great. Now, I will link this down below, but if you're also interested in other stuff like this, other Starfield themed items, they do have an Xbox controller, and I think they just announced a Xbox console wrap that is also Starfield themed. So I will link those down below if you are interested. Now functions are pretty simple and pretty easy to learn. It's of course got a power button on the back. It also has a microphone auto mute switch, and it does have an indicator light on this little transparent mic here. Both of these cups actually do swivel on this device, and that to me is a very cool feature. I like it a lot because it's easy to learn what they do. The right side is just a volume adjustment going all the way from 0 to 100. Now the left side have a incoming voice versus incoming game dial. So when you turn it to one side, you'll get full game, no voice. And when you turn it to the other side, you'll get full voice and no game. But there's a whole bunch in between. So you can kind of set how much of your incoming like friend volume you want versus how much of the game volume. And it's kind of anywhere in between those settings. I will say for Microsoft devices like a Windows computer, for example, this can plug in via USB-C if you want, but the pairing was actually pretty easy to do. And I want to give them credit for having it work well with their own devices. So for build and aesthetics and like novelty reasons, this thing is a total score. I like this thing a lot. I like everything about the way it looks. To be completely honest, I'm going to keep this around just for the sake of B-roll because the sound quality is ass. It sucks. It's really, really bad. If you've never seen my channel before, if this is your first time watching my channel, I do only audio reviews. I review headphones and amplifiers that range from everything from the cheap $20 range all the way up to thousands of dollars for headphones. And yes, they do go up that much. If you've never heard of me before, if you've never seen me before, I have a ton of experience with headphones. I know how they're supposed to sound. And my job here is to call out when a headphone is good and when a headphone is bad, and to get your ears the best sound quality possible. This headphone suffers from two major problems. It suffers primarily from what audiophiles would call a bad case of mid-bass bloom. It has a very boxy, closed-in sound and a very whomping bass response because that approximately 60 to 100 hertz range is really, really boosted here. Now, to an untrained ear, this sounds like good bass. A person who's never really paid attention to sound might come in and think, okay, this has a lot of bass, but there's a vast difference in the potential quality of bass that you can get with different headphones. And this one is simply just really terrible and quite sloppy, to be honest. The second problem that this has is a distinct lack of top end, which really kills both immersion and sound staging. And we'll talk about that in a second. I wanted to backtrack a little bit to mid-range though, because the mid-range is got a decent tonality for it for what it is, but the frequency forwardness, the how forward things like voices for movies or dialogue in a video game, that ability, it's not really there. It doesn't pop through. It's not very distinct and clear. So for a game like Baldur's Gate, for example, a game like Starfield, which is supposed to have 200,000 plus lines of dialogue, you're really going to want a lot of cut through so that it's easy, clear, and it just sounds better for just general sound. Like you want a thick and full mid-range, and this doesn't have that. So on top of having a muddy and bloated bass response, not a very forward mid-range, and a basically non-existent top end, like things above 10,000 hertz don't really exist on this headphone seemingly. It's just a very bloated and sloppy sound signature coming from this headphone, unfortunately. So for people who watch the channel a lot, I am sorry to go over this again, but for the newcomers, I do want to talk a little bit about what sound staging is, because it can be a massive advantage and immersion tactic for a headphone, and this doesn't really have it. So what sound staging is when you're listening to a headphone that is very good at sound staging can make the field of sound around you seem both wider, taller, and more distinct in terms of positioning. Headphones like this sound very internal. They sound like they're coming from the headphone and kind of just in your head. A really good sound staging headphone, however, can sound like, yes, it's coming from there, but also like it's coming from outside your head. And it really opens up the space in the environment auditorily that you can pick up. And this in competitive games can be a huge advantage, but it's also just very good for immersion when you feel like you're in an environmental space. And this headphone, again, just doesn't have it. I don't think it's a very good gaming headset from a sound perspective. Now, if you're just into mid-bass and you just like mid-bass, sure, totally get it. But if you're like at all looking for something that actually has a superior sound quality, maybe even a competitive advantage, or just something that just generally sounds very clear and correct, this really isn't it. So that brings me to what I would recommend instead if you are into sound quality. This is an open back PC38X, and it's about the same price, give or take $10. It's got a microphone and a volume dial, but it does not have some of the the chat mute options like this does. It's also not wireless. You will want to plug in a wire. If you're on PC, this does come with a long cable that will plug directly into your motherboard for both microphone and the headset output. And this also comes with a shorter cable that will plug into an Xbox controller so that you can get your microphone output and your headphone output straight from the Xbox controller. Now for sound quality, this headphone basically has everything that the Xbox headset does not have. It has excellent mid-range. It's got pretty good bass response that isn't just bloated and sloppy. It's actually clean and clear and has good fidelity to it. But on top of those things, it also has good top end and good sound staging, which allows us to not only be competitively better, and anybody who uses this will tell you that it's obviously better, but the immersion factor, which for a game like Starfield, I'm going to want, I think you will want it. It's just vastly superior for things like immersion. It seems like it's about the same weight, but the clamp force is a lot less. The ear pads are bigger and more breathable, and the headband design is actually superior on this, in my opinion. Mileage will vary though. Okay, I love these things. Purely as a novelty though. For $124, you can just simply get a much better sounding headphone. For functionality, there are also a couple options out there, but I really like just using a cable. I know it's not as clean, but you can just get a much better sound quality off of something like a PC38X for the same price. I do want to show you a little bit of a microphone comparison here between these two headphones. And while this is not indicative of the sound quality coming out of the actual headphone portion, you can really tell the quality and care difference between these two manufacturers for these two products. For sound itself, my conclusion is that this headphone is terrible and your ears deserve better, but it is cool. So this is going to be the microphone test of the Xbox headset. I have not done any post-processing. For those of you who are curious, yes, this is relatively comfortable with glasses, though not my favorite, but not terrible. Generally speaking, this thing doesn't sound the best. Now, because it's kind of out of the way, it does avoid things like plosives for the most part, which would be that kind of like poppy poof, poof sound. So it does a decent job there, but overall fidelity is really not the best. Is it usable? Yes. Is it great? No. And then this is, in my opinion, the much better and much more comfortable PC38X. Right now is a good time to tell you about upcoming videos so that you can subscribe if you want to see those. One is going to be the HiFiMAN Ananda Nano, which is a premium headphone, and I'll be not only reviewing that, but in a separate video comparing it against a bunch of other things, similar to what I did with the Aria Organic. After that, I have a bunch of other fun videos that I want to bring up and want to do, so subscribe for those if you haven't already. Make sure to ring that bell as well. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.